Alright, welcome. Today I will be talking about shaman practices, and the question we will be answering is if shamanism is either helpful or prohibitive. Okay, explaining shamanism. I'm not someone who knows a lot about history, so I'll be trying to explain the history behind it. But the first occurrences of shamanism dates back to somewhat 50,000 years ago, and this is what I've read in Graham Hancock's book, The Supernatural. And therefore, shamanism is quite old, and scientists discovered this when they realized that the Paleolithic cave art is based on the visions they got from the iboga plant. But you may be asking, who are they? So, shamans are mystics who use ayahuasca in ceremonies to either contact spirits or perform dream training. And it is this dream training I want to delve into today. So, excuse me for my lack of explaining who they are. I've only done research in the dream training stuff. But to sort of further explain who they are, they usually wear headbands with feathers and are known for their cave arts. Now, ayahuasca, unlike some hallucinogens, can be found in plants. This is also called DMT. Because shamans back in their time didn't have the equipment to make sophisticated drugs. They used ayahuasca instead. They didn't know any better. Dream training. Before we delve into dream training, there is a quote from Carl Gustav Jung which goes like this. What you resist persists, and what you allow to be disappears. For a quick look at the hallucinations which people tend to have during ayahuasca, people can experience a bad trip, which can make people afraid. They hallucinate unpleasant thoughts, therefore it's called a bad trip. Often at the end of bad trips, people experience being rescued by angels or a feeling of bliss. And bad trips can be very beneficial, and people report that they refrained from using drugs or alcohol or being abusive afterwards. Before I explain why unpleasant hallucinatory experience can be so wholesome, let's first look at the psychoanalysis behind abuse and drug addiction and other unhealthy behavior. So behavior like abuse and drug addiction are ego defense mechanisms. They are deployed whenever we try to forget memories, thoughts, or feelings which are hard to deal with. But instead of coping with difficult situations, these become ingrained with your personality, always lingering within your subconscious mind. And psychoanalysts like Carl Gustav Jung called this the shadow self. It is an integration of repressed and disliked qualities about ourselves. Others disprove the idea that a crux is resembled within the mind. People like humanists claim the human mind always looks for solutions, and according to them, it is the environment which causes the abusive behavior. Who is right will be a topic for another time. But these repressed cruxes develop in childhood years, when children experience abuse or endure traumatic events. Now, people always seek for pleasure, and that's why instead of dealing with cruxes, they repress them, which takes form in different ego defense mechanisms. It is said by some that behavior like gender dysphoria, perversions, narcissism, and addictions are various sorts of ego defense mechanisms. Some like to believe that addiction or gender dysphoria is in our genetics, but I'm not someone who thinks that. But for a summary, people repress their crux by seeking pleasure. In example, someone drinks alcohol to get over his ex. Carl Gustav Jung claims that to cope with your shadow self, you have to face it. Like he said, what you resist persists, and what you allow to be disappears. Into the dream world. The idea behind the training is to face the unpleasant memories from your childhood. These unpleasant memories are repressed into the subconscious mind and shoot into consciousness in the form of symbols, like a boogeyman or monster. In order to face your crux, you endure the nightmare. For example, a nightmare in which you run away from your monster, you stop running. You can talk to it and see if it responds. You can also try and imagine what he wants to tell you from his viewpoint. Maybe he tells you he wants to eat you, or maybe he needs something, you never know. These unpleasant memories or feelings can resemble themselves in more ways. For example, they can also symbolize themselves as a black hole or a spooky buzz. Whenever you experience unpleasantness, sit with it and see if it resolves itself. If not, don't try. But you don't have to sleep in order to experience nightmares. You can also utilize ayahuasca, or you can do self-hypnosis as well. The benefit of bad trips or nightmares is that specific muscles within the amygdala are trained. The amygdala is responsible for our emotions, anxiety and stress included. The ability to cope with stress or anxiety is developed by training your GABA fibers. These muscles can break stress or anxiety. Thus, ayahuasca neurologically has a lot of benefits. It's important to note that in the years of the Homo sapiens, their neurocortex, which is more rational, didn't really exist back in their time. Therefore, it's called the neocortex. Back in their time, they had a reptilian brain and a limbic system, which you still have located at the center of our brains, but these brains are also more dominant as well. Therefore, our feelings and emotions have priority. Our rationality is influenced by how we feel. This is the reason we perform worse at exams, for example, when we are struggling emotionally. Okay, catharsis theory. When we vent our anger and feelings associated with trauma, it is called a catharsis. What is the validity of catharsis theory, you might be asking? So to test the validity of catharsis theory, Vsauce has a fun experiment whereby people are made angry by convincing them about a dislikable person. Afterwards, half of the subjects were allowed to destruct objects to see if it calmed them down. Others were told to reflect on the situation and look at the objects in the room. Finally, they were set in rooms with a device which allowed them to give the disliked person electric shocks. The people who sat passively in the object's room gave the disliked person low electric shocks. The people who destroyed the objects gave the disliked person high electric shocks. Therefore, catharsis didn't seem to calm people down. It is said that catharsis is only useful as a temporary way of dealing with anger, and that venting can become addictive because it makes people feel good. And that is also kind of my critique towards the experiment. Ayahuasca works because people only get to experience the bad trip. There is nothing pleasurable about the experience. The pleasure is experienced when they accept the unpleasant. On the contrary, the destructive people in this experiment were not told to reflect on their unpleasant memories and thoughts, only those who were told to reflect. But as we can conclude from this experiment, venting doesn't help. But does facing unpleasant memories and thoughts help? It may help for some, but according to my personal experience, I tried self-hypnosis and often got frustrated when facing something unpleasant, and felt nothing of relief afterwards. But I'm talking about my experience with self-hypnosis, however. I've not tried ayahuasca and it may work very differently too. What I would like to see in an experiment is people who were made angry deliberately about a disliked person, and half of the subjects need to reflect on this situation and others try to cope with their situation by either, drinking alcohol or going behind their phones, and see if the people behind their phones actually dealt better with their anger, and to see if the people who needed to reflect on the situation and how they dealt with their anger. Now, besides my videos on Christian apologetics, this is my second video which we can relate to self-help or therapy. I may do some more videos on self-help in the future, but for now, goodbye.